All right. It is actually after 6 o'clock now. We'll call the special meeting of the Midway ISD Board to order. As a special meeting, we don't have pledge or recognition, always the two highlights of any of our meetings. But we got good stuff on here nonetheless. Analysis of the enrollment projections.
All right, Mr. Russick, members of the board. If you'll look in your board packets, and I think Mrs. Milligan is going to put one of those up for us, and I'll share the other one. But you've had a chance, hopefully, to review just Mr. Bob Templeton's forecast that he did, of course, for the demographic study. We had an update of this demographic study in June of this summer, and so, of course, we're very interested to see. And so I just wanted, main thing is just to kind of explain a couple of things. Remember, just a reminder, remember in the forecast, if you're looking in the 22-23 column, fifth grade, any fifth grade grandfathering, he didn't include. So you might have a school a little bit less today than what he projected because maybe their fifth graders are grandfathered. And so predominantly, you might have seen that at maybe some at Woodway and or some at South Bosque. There was some at all schools, though, did go into account for a little bit more maybe at a school or less at another one. The other thing is when he made these projections as well, you believe, I'm trying to remember, I believe it was in May or June or even the 1st of July when the board approved the pre-K3 programs. And so we do have several pre-kindergarten through third grade programs scattered throughout the district. And so that's when I bring you to the other sheet in here, or I just passed out to you. I just passed it up to you, sorry. So if you look at underneath some of your things, there is today's enrollment. And so today we almost hit the 8,750 student mark. So everybody see that in front of them? That's an old-fashioned paper copy in front of you. So in terms of that number, it's ironically, but it's 300 plus students. But I believe the number when we ended was 8436 when we ended the school year back in May at Memorial Day. So more than 300 additional students to the district.
So as usual, you're exceeding expectations.
Exceeding expectations. We hit the ground, we hit doors, we knocking on doors, come to school. But staff worked really hard over the summer, did truly calling, being sure people knew how to register, getting in place, and so systems were in place. So we did see that bump. But remember, as I said, some of these could be also attributed to, if you look under pre-K, I can kind of give you an idea. Mrs. Glazeman's here, she can tell me if I'm off, but you'll see under the pre-K column, 284 students. Generally, that had been ranging around 225, I can't remember, before pre-K3. I mean, how many pre-K3? 20? 80? Okay. Yeah, so around the 200 then, I'm sorry. In terms of traditional 4-year-olds coming to us in pre-K4. So the pre-K3 did add some students to us as well, as I just mentioned. But then otherwise you can look and compare, I think with Mr. Templeton, very good job with that. It was very helpful for us. Castleman Creek is less, as you can see, which is good thing, with a little less than 600. We did, though, have at that time, made the decision to move one of our special education type programs to Park Hill, looking at the projection of Park Hill being smaller at the time of this was done, but now, as you can see, Park Hill, that area really truly is booming with 610 kids. So they have quite a few students growing in that part of the district. But one program we know for sure will move back to Castleman Creek next school year. It's not a lot of students, maybe 10 to 15 in a special ed program, but they'll go back to Castleman next year. We're balancing out the programs next school year, just one more adjustment to make next school year for all of those programs. But otherwise, very nice. It's I guess what I'm hearing from the campus principals is it's just a different feel a little bit, even with 50 to 100 kids less on campus. It's of course, elbow room moving, in terms of the procedurally and with the students and moving around in movement. So very, very pleased. You'll notice too, pretty close with our two middle schools, still strong enrollment Midway Middle, and that's a good thing and a challenge with a major renovation project going on. And so still over 1,000 kids at that campus. And so I was looking, again, if you look, but almost identical to what Bob said, Mr. Templeton, he had projected 1092. We have more, though, at River Valley. I saw a surge somewhat, calls, interest, and enrollment back at River Valley this particular year, so. And then Ms. Smith sitting over 2,600, 2,654, so. That's it. So really, just to compare, just to say, the use of Mr. Templeton and the forecast was very, very helpful, of course, for us with staffing. I think we had, at the last minute, maybe two that I know of, teachers only at the elementary level. One, some overstaffed Spring Valley went to Park Hill to balance classes, and one from Chapel Park went back to Woodway to balance classes. And so that was all we had to do, but caught it. One teacher that had been was at Chapel Park had been at Woodway, so that was hopefully a nice move. And Mrs. Kirkpatrick's here. Hopefully she and her staff welcomed her back. Jordan Wells. So we really, for all of that and all that we've done, ambitious with the zoning and the students and growth and opening all these campuses, it was good to see just the fact that we had the staff. That didn't mean we had vacancies. We had the staff. We just were able to move them to where they were needed. So, any questions about the forecasts? Enrollment.
I mean, one way to look at this, assuming that kids are going to, enrollment's going to continue to grow regardless, just a question of how fast and when. We can look at this as, at the high school level, we're effectively a year ahead of projection already. It looks like the middle school level is about 3 years ahead of projection, the numbers we're seeing. I haven't added up elementary, but is that pretty accurate? To say that we're at least a year or two ahead of what the projection was. So what does that look like for the next year and the next year, right?
Let me tell you.
It's gonna accelerate.
So that's a 3.7% increase year over year. So you just take a 3% increase and compound that, in 5 years we'll be over 10,000.
Yeah.
So the compounding effect is.
It moves us 3 or 4 years ahead, yeah.
But as a reminder, these demographic studies are really only shelf life of 5 years.
Yeah.
He does a 10-year forecast for discussion.
Right.
But
And I would say that.
and he could do it annually. He should do it annually for us at this
Right,
point.
Yeah.
with the amount of that housing stock that's coming online and the number of lots planned,
Yeah.
I think we're crazy if we don't think that this is going to be more.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I think George's point is a good one. We need to make sure going forward, we're getting Bob to refresh that pretty much every year, because I think this board might be in a position to be looking at further schools a lot sooner rather than later. One question I had, Wesley, what number were you using in your crystal ball that you built
Yeah.
our budget on?
That's the next
for
question.
student increase?
For budgeting purposes, I used ADA increase of, I think, 2.5%. And so we're at enrollment, we're at what, 3.7, 3.8%. So, how that looks, depends on our attendance and sort of, weighted funding areas. But we'll see, but pretty close.
It's good. Better than being on this end than the other.
Yeah.
Right. Because pandemic aside, our attendance rate has been pretty steady over the years and pretty high, so your numbers are probably conservatively low then. Anybody else? Questions?
Yeah, from a capacity standpoint, it looks like, I'm assuming a lot of the South Bosque fifth graders were grandfathered, is why that number's so high. Because it looks like today we're at like 98% capacity still at South Bosque, so that shouldn't be the case going forward, I wouldn't think. Okay. Because that seems like that's one of the problems we tried to solve, Cool.
Well, the biggest class at South Bosque is obviously the fifth grade.
Yeah.
So that would make sense.
Yes. I agree. Okay. Thank you.
I like that word.
All right, nothing further on that one. Y'all ready for our future use of the bond fund proceeds, additional projects, understanding we're not making any decision on that tonight. We're just talking about the realm. So we're ready for that one? If we are, then I'm going to give Mrs. Carl a chance to come and speak to the board. Even though she moved out from being our across-the-street neighbor, I'm still going to let her talk.
I heard you'll have some good neighbors now, though.
Say that again?
I heard you have some good neighbors in our place.
Well, it took them long enough. Let's say that, right? At any rate, Lindsay, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Oh, let me set the timer, sorry.
I think she will be mindful of our time, right?
I hope so.
But I will certainly let you, Pam, keep track.
Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Lindsay Carl, and I am currently the president of the Woodway Elementary PTA. I'm here to ask for you to please consider using any excess bond funds to update the Woodway Elementary playground. The current Woodway playground was built in 2002. At the time, it was built as a joint venture between the Woodway PTA and the City of Woodway through a Texas Park and Recreation grant. To my knowledge, the Woodway playground has not been updated since it was initially installed. The biggest problem with our playground is that it is currently not accessible to all of our students. We have students of many different abilities, such as students who are in wheelchairs, walkers, or are visually impaired, that are unable to access the playground at all. Due to the incorrect grading of the ground, the mulch and pebbles covering the playground are frequently washed away, thus covering the sidewalks, making them inaccessible as well. In addition to the mulch covering the sidewalks, the retaining wall rocks are not secure and frequently fall on the sidewalk as well. Beginning in 2009, the PTA began to poll the teachers and ask them how they would like to see the Woodway PTA funds reinvested into our school. And an overwhelming response was our playground. Ms. Kirkpatrick and the PTA president met several times regarding the playground and formed a steering committee to look at and address the specific needs that would make it safe and accessible for all of our students. The initial walkthrough of the playground last year included Dr. K, Ms. Kirkpatrick, PTA board members, members of the Midway maintenance team, playground developers, parents of students with different abilities, students, and teachers. After multiple bids coming in around $400,000, it was determined that this was too big of a project for the PTA to undertake. The all-in annual budget of the Woodway PTA is around $115,000, and it would be an impossible feat to raise the money needed to completely update our playground. To my understanding, because of when the playground was installed, it was grandfathered under certain ADA regulations. If PTA picked a small section of the playground to update, the entire playground at that time would then need to be updated to comply with ADA regulations. We understand that there are many much-needed projects in the district that would benefit from the excess bond money. The Woodway PTA would love to collaborate with the district to find a solution for our playground that would benefit all of the students at Woodway Elementary. Thank you for your consideration.
And that was almost perfectly on.
She practiced her time.
She did.
Anybody have any questions for Lindsay? If not, then we'll turn it over to our leader here.
When was the
George.
four-
I did have one question, yeah.
When was the $400,000 bid? What year was that? Was that this last year? Okay.
Has anybody been hurt on the playground due to some of these? Oh, Ms. Kirkpatrick's been hurt, okay.
Thank you. All right, George.
Okay. Well, I'm also going to rely on Mr. Brooks too, but in your board packet there, I think, and Ms. Milligan has up on the screen, budget y'all are familiar with. This is our budget summary where we stand, and Mr. Brooks has done to this point. We're having this discussion a little bit earlier. You may recall in other previous board meetings I said in terms of final bills, final payouts of the other construction projects, when I'm talking about the CTE addition and or River Valley, Park Hill, Chapel Park, and the ITC Center, that most of those are at this time getting finished up, but we still have there's some more bills to pay and settle ups, as well as with punch list items and things like that. And so we really will have a better in terms of a number, probably October, 1st of November with those particular projects. But Mr. Brooks has been working with our contractors as well as Mr. Freeman to get these as close as we can finalized. We also, as you all know, have employed a construction auditor that is working and it does a great job and provides that, and I think showed us ITC one, and so we saw that one pretty much closed out, and then they'll continue to work and close out some of these others. And so just in summary, if you can see currently, if we were to talk about where we are today, I do think this number will fluctuate somewhat. This is not inclusive of the current project, Midway Middle School, meaning Midway Middle School is in phases. It's bid, it's a GMP, we feel good about it. It has some contingency funds, but it's not projected to be finished until the start of school in 23-24, so August of 2023. But looking at again, back to this form that we have up on the screen, looking at interest earned, things like that, we're at 6.5, and I believe in your board packet materials, we certainly estimate closer to about 7 million today would be available in excess funds. We certainly think that could rise, but I think we're in a, should have began the discussion in a fortunate position. This isn't to toot horns or things like that, but to have a $150 million bond project, to start those, bid those, have a pandemic, have inflation, get them in and get opened and ribbon cutted and all of those kinds of things for the most part. You saw price increases for the middle school renovation, but to still have what we promised the community with the 2019-2020 bond is very, very thankful that we were able to do everything. So we're at the stage now, fortunately, where we get to look a what if. And so then I included for you just as a review. Not all of you were on the board at the time when the bond election was called. You might recall that was a facility study committee, spent over a year studying this, made recommendations. I believe the month was the month of May of 2019. They made the recommendation, and then you all studied it. The board did as a group, studied the recommendations. We did some surveying in the community, used a third-party surveyor to kind of look what the temperament of the community at that time was for different projects as well as tax impact. And so if you look, these are still committee ranked ordered at that particular time. And initially that was $160+ million. Remember, we settled on 148, but you can see what was ranked first from the committee is converting Woodgate to Chapel Park, having a second middle school, River Valley. Maybe Ms. Milligan, if you could pull that up, if you don't mind, go ahead. Yeah, those particular slides, just for everyone else's benefit. Third was career and technology, then our maintenance areas with roof replacements, and then the middle school renovation, and HVACs, building the new elementary school, the technology was in that, and then fine arts, looking at the front parking lot addition, some performing arts renovations, instruments, equipment, technology, storage for fine arts, and then finally locker room additions. And so we, pulling those up, you can see the option one was the 160 million. And then if you scroll down, I believe, yeah, the next one there was what we decided, because we also had a little over a penny decrease in the INS tax rate and how we got to 148 million. So you can see we went through 8 things. And so now, if you don't mind going back up, you can see what was 9, 10, 11, and 12, and I think Cindy has that up. It's the first proposal of $160 million, and so that was the front parking lot for the band practice, as well as additional parking for the theater entrance. That's been done. That's already been completed. Came in a lot lower than that number, by the way, than 1.2 million. And so Mr. Umhofer now has been working with Mr. Brooks about the performing arts renovations and instruments and storage. Some of that was included in FF&E in terms of fine arts with the new facility. Some of it, not quite. Today our number is looking like we may need an additional $300,000 to finish that number. What is that number? 10 and 11.
Both of them
Yes.
combined? We just need
Combined, we
300?
would be able to get that done.
10 and 11?
Yes, and so what's left, again, going to the committee, what's left is locker rooms at the high school. Remember, this was some discussion of different scenarios. And so, like I said, today we're not making decisions. Briefly, we looked at one being build new ones. You move football program to the MAC. You take the current setup and renovate all of those for sports. So that was this close to 10 million. You look at other things too. I mean, we can again go back to the drawing board as well in terms of looking at locker rooms. But that was why we had that 10 million. This was priced in 2019, not in 20, not today's prices. So that I don't know what today's prices would be. So then there, I know as Ms. Carl talked about in her opening remarks too about playgrounds, we've had then other. And so before, let me do those in just a minute, just to tell you all other things that have come up. And then we've got people that could address questions about fine arts or address questions about locker rooms. But any questions, those that are new to the board, about the bond and how we got to 148 million and the process, the ranking, what we settled on? Everybody good? Okay. So, in addition to that, Ms. Glazman, in her role this semester, you all know she's retiring in December, but it's been special projects, and one of her special projects she's worked with Mr. Freeman has been auditing, if for a better word, looking at all playgrounds, at all 8 elementaries. We know 2 are brand new, so basically 6. Looking at those, and so had looked at all encompassing, looking at playgrounds and looking at similar issues brought up today, as well as had the same consultant that worked with us at Chapel Park to help with pricing. And so that's been good. It's been refreshing to see that and to hear and to have that person come and really review the entire district's playgrounds. And so help me with a ballpark figure. So for all other 6 campuses, that would include, I believe, 4 of the 6 or 5 of the 6. But that would include it all, touching all.
There's upgrades needed. Campuses, so that everyone had, effective playgrounds for children, it'd be about 1.8 million.
And of course, this includes Woodway in that total.
Yes. Some of the things that they talked about. So again, I appreciate it. I just wanted, of course, took to heart what Woodway said, but also wanted to look at all of them as well for accessibility and for covers, things like that too. And because what we have at the other 2, very nice. We've been very pleased so far with the Park Hill and Chapel Parks. So about 1.8 for that.
That's both playgrounds at each
I thought you said
elementary?
8 million.
No.
Where did that come from? Airplane.
And that's just the playground?
Still keep it that way.
All-
I'm trying to think, is there another one that's Spring Valleys was gonna be all inclusive, where we could put one together. Some were built separately, so.
Right.
Chapel Park, I forgot they each have 2. If we
Castleman
could do
Creek,
it,
Spiegel.
where all the kids can play on one playground, and they're appropriate for each grade level, that's what we'd like to do to make it even more inclusive, not just for gen ed and special ed, but for all kids to be challenged on playgrounds, and together.
So again, that was one thing we've done. The other, Ms. Marlin has worked, because oftentimes in her office, there she is, gets questions oftentimes from PTAs and boosters and support groups about signage overall. So we were looking at digital signages and she did a great job too of working with consultants about that. We wanted to, if we could, I've been very pleased. You all may have gone or saw Daktronics, the new signage, big sign, if you will, big TV we have at Panther Stadium, very nice, but Daktronics does a good product. And so we were looking at with our Daktronics consultant about all of those that don't have one and looking, and I wrote that down somewhere. Here it is, right in front of me. Tracy was looking at, for example, Spring Valley, looking at Castleman Creek, South Bosque, aging. Our district one is already aged out almost. They're in front on Mars Drive. Midway Middle School, and Woodway Elementary as well. Things like that. So not every campus, some are operational or working, but looking at all of that, that's about $335,000. So again, that's not
35?
to get signage up to date and for pretty comparable amongst all of our schools. Many of the campuses already had it, like River Valley has signage in its project. We may do a change order at, for example, at Midway Middle wasn't spec, but we can look at that for new digital signage.
I know this one's in pretty
Instead of-
bad shape, it's up.
Oh, yeah, kind
Like
of,
the
it's a leaning
all
tower,
over.
Yeah.
what's it called? Know my history there, but, thank you, a Pisa. So anyway, so again, as I said, we're not necessarily prioritizing, but I wanted the board to understand the work we're doing already in the backside about looking at projects and looking at the thing and what we could do with around 7 million. Yes, the committee, it's here in black and white, is about the locker room expansion, and so that's something we still should explore, consider, go to the drawing board, look at that. Because we have not, in those particular areas of the high school, we've expanded and expanded and expanded, but we've never expanded, other than building the MAC and the weight room, any locker rooms. Those were built for 1,800 to tops enrollment when we first opened in 2003. We're almost 20 years later and have more students, not picking on any one particular sport, but all sports, or more students are participating. And so that is one kind of last reno, if you will, or area to address for at the high school. So I wish we had more to say, oh, yeah, the magic wand and do them all. We might get a little better than the 7 million, maybe. Wesley's shaking his head, which is a good sign, Hey, I take that when he does that. I mean, that means it's a possibility. But nothing too much made more than that. Let's be realistic, because most bills have been paid. We're finishing up. As I said, remember, we were able to do all of this. It got it's on time. We were able to furnish these buildings nicely. We weren't skimp or value engineer anything. We got what we wanted. I don't know if anything else, Mr. Freeman, on your list of maintenance and roofing, if we're okay, or things like that. But I do know another need, but it cannot be spent. Old rules allowed it, but we, with growth this year, we probably have 4 to 5 more hundred riders on buses, I think is the last count. Again, another special project, Ms. Glazeman, how many?
2,400 gen ed riders with 175 special ed riders.
Last year, we had probably 1,800, so 600, 1,800 gen ed riders last year. We can accommodate that, I'm just saying, but buses, buying buses, that has to be specific when you call a bond election. It can't just be spent from any excess funds. It's not allowed.
Not buses. Interesting.
No.
Interesting.
So you have to specifically be in the language of your bond election in 2019 when it went out to the voters that said buses,
Oh, we did.
for some reason.
No, I mean, just saying we did.
So
Odd.
that's the bond council that represents the district, so. All right, so hit me with your best shot now. Questions on all of that?
So Brad just had a question, yeah.
So did we have, I remember talks about like expanding Spring Valley also?
Oh, yeah.
Is that still?
Yes, sir. We talked about that too, and that you're right. Thank you for bringing that up. You're right. Another idea we did, what we were able to do for Spring Valley was address some traffic issues. Spring Valley Road is currently a mess, under construction. It was fortuitous, perfect timing to get our driveway, to get our cars off that, and that was completed. And so we're glad. But Spring Valley, if y'all don't mind, if you go back to your board packet, I believe on Bob's, on Bob's forecast, you'll notice Spring Valley is 580 capacity. One of the discussions we had was looking at, could we get it closer to the 640, that Hewitt, Castleman Creek, of course, Park Hill is 750. Projections of growth showed the Hewitt side growing exponentially faster. And so it was maybe looking at 4 classrooms at least, trying to get up that enrollment closer to the 640. So estimate 20 kids a room, 80 kids, then we could add to, if I do my math right, 660. So close to. So Brad is right, yes, that could be. I initially visited with the architect about that. There are library services, cafeteria, current restrooms and things like that would not have to be altered or changed. It's still within the TEA guidelines in terms of enough square footage for central places. If you added
Right.
more, because then we wouldn't have to add on the cafeteria and add on to this and add on to that. That's where it gets really, really costly.
Did they give us a rough estimate on what that would be, or did they not back then? Okay.
I wouldn't rely on it anyway.
Yeah, anymore, yeah.
But
Well, and if you look at the projections and believe them, Spring Valley's not projected to get relatively close to 580 even right now.
But what we would do, calling
That's
those,
if you believe them.
what we would do though is go down though and look at where Castleman had yellow and as well as Park Hill, we would shift.
Transit, yeah,
You have to then,
Redraw the-
you have to draw lines again.
Yeah.
which is fun.
So I'm just saying, so that's why it would be because of the pink red there at Park Hill being over 900 kids and stuff. So it's only built for 750, so it would be shifting kids between Castleman and down to Spring Valley.
I think it's maybe worth it to see what that might cost
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah, y'all exactly right. So that was one of the others to think about.
So the current numbers then, George, for Spring Valley, the 508 that's in the board packet and the 494 that's in the old school printed out copy at our place, that does not include a lot of students that are still there because of grandfathering, I
They have-
take it.
Right, they have some, but not a lot.
Okay.
But they did have some grandfather, but not, that I recall. Do you recall anything, Mary Lou?
Is Spring Valley?
Yeah, with the grandfathering.
We actually, not as many, grandfather, but some we took back from Castleman because there was too many fifth graders, so we asked them, would they go back, and I think they had maybe 11 or 12.
Not a big significant number.
Other questions, folks?
I'd be interested to hear from Mr. Shelton about the locker room addition. Could you remind us kind of what was in that? Where are you now? I believe when you put this together, you assessed what it would take to do it and then came back with a figure. And I'm wondering if we gave you a budget and said, here's what we can allot you, could you still do something and make some better accommodations? Because I know you had people, you were really crowded.
Did you ask him to, I asked Brad to come to the microphone.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
I'd certainly like the opportunity, that's for sure. I mean, our problems still exist in terms of overcrowding and kids sharing lockers or splitting teams amongst different locker rooms. The 9 or just under 10, that was, if I remember correctly, was moving almost everyone, football and a few other sports outside, and then
Right.
totally renovating and gutting the inside to accommodate and move some teams around. I know in 21 we met with Steve. In 2021 we met with Steve and kind of narrowed it down, whittled it down a little bit more. And I think that one was around 8, a little over 8. Just paring some of the scope down. So yeah, I think absolutely, I'd love the opportunity to see what we could do with a budget or a number in mind. About 50% of our teams are sharing lockers or are over capacity. And then, those that have been in there, some of them, they may have 100 lockers, but 8 lockers share the same 3 square foot area, which is virtually impossible. So, I mean, so the problems still exist. One of our biggest issues is not the locker room itself, it's the restrooms that are associated with them in the showers. Trying to shower 190 kids with 20 lockers in 15 minutes is pretty interesting. Our basketball teams that have 15 kids on a team have 2 showers. So those are the real things that are kind of rear its ugly head. So I don't know if that answers your question totally, but
Would you address too, remember the discussions, I know the locker rooms came up, as you can see, priority-wise, but I thought there was a discussion of another third gymnasium.
Third gym. or something.
the third
Maybe
gym
would
was
you
the
mind
option,
addressing that?
and I think that was right around $2 million according to Mr. Hafer. Some of the issues, this has already happened this year. We have 2 gyms at the high school. River Valley has more gyms than the high school does. And the high school has a testing issue in terms of just being able to test a large volume of kids. So last week, Monday and Tuesday, I think it was last week, Tuesday, Wednesday, they had testing. So we lost the PE gym for 2 full days. Well, we only have 2 of them, so with volleyball, basketball, all those things going on, we just barely got the arena, and then we lost the PE gym. And so they need a testing site, but we also need a PE gym or a third gym just to accommodate when basketballs and volleyballs are both kick off in season. We got kids going to the middle schools. We had kids going to River Valley this year for practices. So.
What's the difference between the current middle school that was Midway High School, gymnasium space versus Midway High today?
And I wasn't here with the planning of the high school, but the Midway Middle, when it was the high school, it had the 2 gyms, and then it had the red gym up top, which athletics used as a gym. Not as a competition gym, but you could practice volleyball, you could practice basketball. My understanding is when the high school was built, the multipurpose room was supposed to kind of serve that role. Well, there's no basketball goals, there's no floor in there that's suitable for that. So the multipurpose room never really serviced that need for the high school. So when they moved to the high school, they lost a gym essentially, is what happened. So
How many kids are we testing that need that space that preempt the athletes? How many?
So, last week we were testing about 150 kids in the PE gym, and then we had about 60 in the multipurpose room. Moving forward, we're looking at using some of the ITC over the.
That's exactly what I was gonna ask.
Yes, but then you come across, you need buses to bus 150.
Right.
You have 6 buses. you know,
Yeah.
So, or, 3 buses, whatever it
Yeah.
is. You still have to then find drivers and buses and the
Sure.
day transport. So, we're planning on using that for AP testing in the spring, which will alleviate a piece of that. but
Right.
The multipurpose room was built to use like for PE classes and cheerleading and different things like that. It's not a full width of a court, and there's no lines or anything on it either. So, yeah, we lost a gym and we moved.
for the last couple of years during AP testing, we lose the PE gym for 3 weeks
Yeah.
in
In
May.
May.
So.
Yeah.
Where was the idea to put the third gym?
If you kind of visualize where the arena is, the entrance into the arena, there's a little open field right next to it to the left before you go into athletics, so it creates a little U. It would fit right in there. And I believe the wells have been moved already, so I think that would save some of the costs, hopefully. But
Would that be included in this 9.8?
that was not included.
No, that's not, it was separate.
You're right, thank you.
The last number, when Mr. Hafer did it together, it was right
Being hopeful.
around 11, I think, for both
Gotcha.
locker rooms and the gym. But that was the full scope of the locker rooms.
So if you were forced to choose between 2 million to deal with the gym and less than the money that you might have wanted for the locker rooms, which would you prefer?
When I prioritize it, I always try to think of how can I impact the most kids. So I don't know that I have a concrete answer for you. I'd like to see, one, what that number is and how many kids can we impact with that number as opposed to a gym. So I'm kind of hedging, I guess, a little bit. But
It's fair.
I would think, having functional locker rooms with showers and restrooms.
Right.
Fundamental level
Yeah.
Absolutely.
of life there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I would also, when we're talking about these kind of projects, especially with the, probably look at a different delivery method too. Maybe look at a design build delivery method where we put it out for proposals. Here's how much money we have. Here are the specs we want. Put the onus on them to figure out how to make it fit in that budget and deliver the project. As opposed to sending it, hiring an architect.
Sure.
They draw up plans, and they draw up nice plans, but sometimes they're a little nicer than they have to be. And, then there's the process of value engineering, all that stuff. But put the incentive on the team, the architect and contracting team, to hit our budget off the bat. So, I know.
Or they tell us if they could do it or it couldn't be done. They would say. Let's say the budget
Yeah, they
is not.
tell us we're crazy, but,
Yeah.
I think, probably they'll figure out a way. They want a job, they'll figure out a way, so.
I just want to historically circle back to our original bond development plan, and that was on the original list. And these other things are great, they have tremendous value, but I remember our thinking was, if we can find a way to address everything on the list, and we had to give that money back for property tax relief at the time to, help pass the bond. So, if there's a way to do that, I mean, that was part of our initial intent, as I recall, was be patient, we're gonna see if we can figure out a way to make this happen.
Appreciate that.
The last thing on my notes from that conversation we had a few months ago was awnings in elementary schools. There's a few that don't have them yet, and I don't know if we're still looking at the cost of what that might.
Buddy, write that down. Oh, I didn't know Evan priced awning.
Yeah, I know some of them do, some of them don't, so I don't even know what the impact might be, but.
Brad, can you tell us the number of students roughly?
I mean, a lot of it depends on the scope. We have 900 kids in
You do it all,
athletics.
yeah.
Now, some of those swim don't use a locker room at the high school. Half the tennis team does. So, using locker rooms is about 800 kids. So,
A lot of the locker rooms are shared though.
yeah.
watching youth football, like there's multiple sports.
What's come in?
They all share the same common wet area.
For stalls and
Yeah.
shower stalls.
So they're storing their gear in the same locker as another student?
Some sports are, some sports have moved over and taken other teams' locker rooms. Like girls soccer, for example, they have 40 locker rooms, they have 50 kids. So they go in and share with the tennis locker room. So we've taken PE locker rooms, we've taken every square inch we could just to spread out. Yeah.
Very good.
Anybody else?
We have needs.
Maybe we need to get the home edit team out there and
We have needs.
maximize use of
You
storage
promised a
space.
bake sale last when we were.
How many more ads can you sell on that scoreboard? I don't know.
As many as needed.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett.
So Wesley, on the number you have there, just so I'm clear, it talks about contingency money, but what that number is, even though it's not a final number, it's still subject to flux between now and then. It's basically the all-in, all-done net number across all the projects, those that like Midway Middle School that are gonna be over what we plan to spend, the other ones where we're under, the interest and everything. That's the bottom line, triple net, if you will, number that we're looking at, whatever it comes to be. Right now, it's a little less than 7 million.
Yes, sir, that bottom number is 6.5.
0.56.
Right.
Right, so that's where we currently are with all the contingencies, those estimates and the write-up is included in there. Interest income, that's interest income, that 2 million is what we've collected to date. So there'll be some more of that coming in. And then the middle school project, of course, it's an estimate, it's based on our GMP we've been given, and I think there's like 750,000 contingencies in that project. And that's the wild card, like the FF&E for middle school, projecting 1.7 million, and that's just really a percentage based on the construction cost of the project, and so that could vary a little bit. But other than that project, everything else is pretty close.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? We done with this one? Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Need more interest.
Safety and security update. We're gonna talk about this in here some and then closed session some.
As Dr. Otajima comes up, I think you might have noticed, but Pam is wearing too, but the maroon in the room is for support of Uvalde. Uvalde started school today. They postponed their first day of school until now, and it was I think a statewide push to support that district for all that they've been through, and so it was very appropriate today as well for Dr. Otajima to share some requirements and things like that of districts that were from the aftermath of Uvalde, particularly looking at our, I call it a semi or a partial audit, and she's prepared tonight to share with you public information regarding that. So, Dr.
Very good.
Otajima.
Thank you. So we're back again to talk about safety and security, which has been on the forefront of educational topics and issues in media, as Dr. Kay's already mentioned, with our Uvalde support. You may remember that on June 1st, the governor charged the Texas School Safety Center with communicating with all school districts safety requirements that should be completed prior to students coming back to school in August, or September in some cases. And so the slides that we have prepared tonight are going to outline Midway's response to those charges that were put forth for schools to take care of for safety and security. So the first thing we'll look at are the outcomes of those summer safety audits and the requirements. We'll also look at the intruder detection safety audit, which you may have heard about. So we'll give you some more details on that, as well as updates to our multi-hazard emergency operation plan, and then also talk quickly about the iWatch Texas reporting network that you may have seen in media lately. So as far as summer safety audit outcomes go, the first charge of the governor's safety requirements was that our Safety and Security Committee meet. We're required to do this by law already, to have a committee and to meet 3 times a year, and so they asked that we meet at least in the summer once prior to students coming back to school. We did that in July, and then we'll actually meet with that committee again on Thursday to talk about the outcomes of the audits that we did and the steps that we've taken prior to submission of the data that we need to submit. We looked at safety issues, identified areas of concern, and then addressed that with action plan and steps when we met in July, and then we'll report back to them in September 8th, or on September 8th. We were also required to review our active threat plan. We looked at this threat plan with the Safety and Security Committee. We identified issues. We updated that plan with new personnel and revised language that was needed. And we certainly reviewed that with the campus members of those behavioral threat teams as well. We looked at portable building safety. We do have new portables that have been moved to our middle school, so we looked at the Texas School Safety Center's guidance on an annex for portable safety, and we met that really item by item with our own portable safety guide annex that goes in our EOP. We, in our work through that guidance, we installed some temporary fencing to complete the rest of the fencing around the portable area that's in that construction area as a deterrent, so students know and visitors know that that area is not an access point for the school. We've also installed additional cameras in areas around portables to make sure that we had good line of sight for security reasons. And then our best positive impact for safety concerns around portables is just active monitoring. So anytime students are in and out of buildings, we have adults actively monitoring during those passing times. We looked at staff safety training. Most of this happened in the August back to school days for teachers. Our emergency operations representatives on each campus are responsible for training campus staff, so they looked at our standard response protocol on each campus. We're utilizing the Raptor app, so teachers were trained on that component as well. During back to school, they reviewed campus procedures with teachers, and then also talked about the procedures for all of our drills. Another requirement was our substitute safety training. We routinely do this every year. We train substitutes on the standard response protocol, and then also campuses talk to them specifically where they work as a substitute on the campus procedures. We were to schedule all of our emergency drills. We routinely did this already, and so those drills have already been set up for the school year. Again, we use the Raptor system for this, so it's able to help us track every single drill, so those are already pre-scheduled in the system, and we know and audit when those take place, and they can be updated by the campus person responsible for that along the way. And then again, for drill purposes, campuses review their procedures for all the types of drills. We also completed the summer partial safety audit, and this we went through step by step the last time we spoke about the audit. So campuses conducted the audit, and then they reported back to a district committee, and then we addressed issues that had come up at that time. So they reported back to us by September 1st, and then we were able to put work orders in place, August 1st, so that we were able to put work orders in place and have jobs completed prior to students coming back to school. We also looked at the external doors on every campus, so we audited every outside door for particular safety protocol and quality of the equipment to make sure it was working as it's designed to work. And then campuses reported that back to the district, and then we addressed any issues through work orders, and we continued to check those through weekly external door checks. Another requirement of the summer safety updates from the governor was that we implement a weekly door check. So every campus now has a system implemented. They have a weekly procedure where they check every external door at least weekly. Many are doing it daily to check it for the particular protocol to make sure that door is working as it should be, and then it's closed and locked. The weekly logs are kept by the campus, and we've written it into Admin Guide that all campuses are to do this on a weekly basis. We've also reviewed our access control procedures. We had great procedures in place to begin with. We've had for years a single check-in point that's at the main entrance of the campus. Visitors show their identification. It's run through our Raptor system. They're given a visitor badge that's printed off at that time with the location of where they're to go on campus. They're not allowed into the building. They don't have access until the person there lets them in, buzzes them into the building. And then the checkout procedures are through the same door. So they come through, we take the badge, and then keep it so that we know they're out of the building and accounted for. Again, with the administrative directive that was required, we now have this in our admin guide that says our we had done this in practice, but we didn't have it written in a policy or a guide. So we wrote it this summer. So we now have in admin guide that all internal doors are to remain locked and closed when students are in those classrooms or spaces, and that we'll do these external door checks on a weekly basis. So moving on to the next component, the intruder detection audit. You may have heard about this. We've got the most recent information from Region 12, who's been working with the Texas School Safety Center. So again, that governor charge on June 1st required that someone conduct in-person unannounced random intruder detections. So there was some concerns when this was first brought about, and that's a good thing to question. So there were concerns about the program overall. One, how it would be implemented, because we have a lot of schools in the state of Texas, and one entity, the Texas School Safety Center, doesn't have the personnel to complete these audits. So now they're working with the Region Service Centers, who will hire the field inspectors. So Region 12 is doing that for our area, and then they'll conduct audits and then report the feedback to this online reporting system. And then we'll know the feedback that comes from them. So they'll report their findings directly back to us. So now we have more information than we had in the past about what's actually going to happen. Again, the concern was with the tone of the audits, no family member or student or teacher or personnel wanted it to be an alarming type encounter. And they wanted good communication about when it would happen. So what we found out now is that the superintendent will receive a phone call within the month that the audit will happen, and they'll notify them that this is not going to be an alarming intrusion, but just a check of the outside doors. They'll come in plain clothing. There's some more details about that here. There's also an expectation that they'll communicate with law enforcement. So someone outside of the school district is also going to know that these audits are happening. And then they will be asking for those weekly door sweeps. And then a person on the campus will be expected to walk them around once they're inside. So when the inspectors come, we now know that they'll be dressed in normal attire. They won't carry weapons. They'll have a clipboard, but no cell phone or purse or bag or anything. They'll check the doors and then self-identify as soon as someone asks them their name or why they're here. They'll identify, and then they'll comply with their request. They're not trying to sneak around and get past anyone. And if anyone asks them to show them their hands, they're supposed to do that immediately for safety of everyone. When they conduct the audit, they're going to try 3 external doors and see if they can gain access. Again, it won't be aggressive, knocking or shaking or rattling the door handles, anything to alarm people. They will self-identify, and if they get in, they go directly to the front office. If anyone requests to see documentation, they'll give them that. They'll ask for our door sweeps. We have that on hand at every school. After they gain access, they'll ask for a person to go with them to conduct the internal door audits, and they'll check 8 to 10 doors, and then they'll give a copy of the audit to a campus administrator that will then deliver it to our superintendent. So this is the form they complete, and you have that in your notes if you care to look at it. But many of the protocol in here are the things that we do every day, and it's also been a good reminder for our campus staff, front office, teachers, students, everyone, to think through these like line items. Are you stopping people that don't have a badge? Everyone checks in at the main office. So just those continual checks, and then also a reason for us to continue to keep those external door log audits up to date. We should do it anyway, but now we know someone's going to be asking for them. So there's another level of accountability. We'll have a copy of this receipt as soon as they do it. They won't do the whole district at one time. So if they're going to notify us within the month, we could get a phone call every month from now until the end of school. Their goal is to audit every school in the state.
When you say school, every campus.
Campus,
Within the
yes.
school districts too,
That's
right,
right.
right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
every
that's right.
campus will have.
Thank
So
you.
they're not going to call us in October and say, we're going to do all of the schools in October. They'll call separately for each one.
Yes.
The understanding.
That's what we understand at this point. Okay, so updates to the multi-hazard emergency operation plan. We utilized the previous audits of that plan to make revisions. We updated roles and responsibility in that document. We included the active threat annex, and then also included, as required by some of this summer information that came out, we included an active shooter component to the active threat annex, so that's now included in the MEOP. For iWatch Texas, this is a system that's been around for a long time. It's a reporting network that law enforcement agencies and the state typically use. It was used for Homeland Security type issues previously. This June, the governor also invited TEA, DPS, Higher Education Coordinating Board to work in that network as well to share information. So it's a two-way street. If we have threats that we are concerned with, that we're looking at in our own district or in our own area, we can submit those to this iWatch system, and then we can also gain information from them as well. So we'll have some of our district safety and security folks join that network so that we can be a part of it, so that we don't miss out on any information and we can pass what information we have along. It will not change our day-to-day reporting options inside the district because we use the Stop It app as anonymous reporting for students, staff, or parents, and we'll continue to use that internally, but this just gives us one more layer of networking for any threats that we think are a problem. Okay, at this time, I can answer questions. And if we need to, we can move into closed session for those, should the need arise.
Questions anybody thinks are appropriate out here, or if you're in doubt, then we'll cover them.
I was concerned earlier, remember, about the portables, and so, especially South Bosque, some people were concerned there, so I haven't been by to see what we've done there. Did we do a fence? Did we put any kind of
We
fencing?
didn't put a fence.
Okay.
We're considering the fence.
Okay.
We're not required by law to have a fence. The middle school we thought was important because of the foot traffic around the middle school.
Right.
And that being a construction zone as well. South Bosque doesn't have quite the amount of foot traffic, and there's not as many students moving into those locations. It's certainly something that we can look at and keep on the list. We do have additional cameras out there now, but students can't get into either the main building or the portable without an adult because we badge in or we key in those areas. So they're accompanied at all times when they're in those areas. Okay. 2 of the 3 portables are being used. The older portable is not being used for anything. And the teachers are moving with the students as they go from the building to the portable.
That's good. I didn't know that. Thought the kids might come out on their own, so,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Are there things, and it wasn't in here, so I'm assuming not, but are there things either in the governor's directive or things that we're looking at to consider outdoor spaces where students are anyway, whether it's playgrounds or practice fields or things like that?
There's not guidance right now on that. I mean, for us, we want active monitoring an adult with students at all time. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Just a quick comment, Mr. Russick, in the board to Dr. Oda Jim and her team and principals and Mr. Garn and technology and Buddy too with maintenance. This was a big ask, big amount of work in a short period of time. Very unfortunate with, of course, Uvalde, what occurred, but then the turnaround to complete this audits and steps and work orders and which needs to be done. Not complaining, but I'm just meaning that the ask was big, and districts are doing it, and as I said, we'll go into a little more detail about some of the results of some of this audit, but we are in a good shape overall as a district in terms of having the technology in place, having well-maintained buildings in place. Yes, we have that, but our portables are temporary for the most part, like we talked about the middle school. Most of any others are temporary classes or in and outs. It's not a permanent class like a second grade or a permanent situation. And so we'd worked really hard to move programs out of portable type facilities and buildings and things like that too. So kudos again, thanks for getting us where we are. Nothing's perfect. We plan, our staff as well, every year have to go through this. They have to, of course, take it very seriously, but every year with the training have to go through that and reminders and drills and things like that too to understand. So appreciate everyone's work in this area.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Personnel. So, Ms. Glazeman, do we need to go into closed session on personnel?
She's really not that, Dr.
I
know.
but
But we do.
We do, as a matter of fact.
it's not a good answer.
Yes.
That's
We-
not a good
Yeah,
answer.
Dr. Knudsen will meet us in closed session. She has one item to share with you, and then Dr. Odejima will also join us.
All right, so it's 7:02 by the computer clock. We'll go into closed session under 551074 and 551076 of the Texas Government Code.
All right.